Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Bear Down Ballers here on the Field of 68. I'm Ryan Wall, joined as always by Jordan Pollock. And Jordan, this past Saturday, we witnessed another edition of one of the greatest rivalries in the sport today in college basketball, UCLA versus Arizona. It wasn't in either campus, but this time it was at Phoenix, and it was a big Arizona Wildcat crowd, but Arizona sadly lost this game 57 to 54. While Arizona did have a 13-point lead in the second half, but they lost that lead and winded up losing this game. But yeah, to start off, how are you doing today? And what are your first takeaways on this game?
I'm doing great, man. I think some of the positives I took away from this game was I thought Vesar played great with the extension of minutes that he got. Sad to see Mo Krivas kind of re-aggravate that injury that he had with his foot, with his ankle. So I think Vesar did really well with the minutes that he was given. Um, Almost double figures, had 9 points, 7 rebounds. He did get into a little bit of foul trouble, and I think that's probably the scariest thing without Mo Krivas is the lack of depth they now have in the front court. But I thought he played really well in the minutes that just we haven't seen him have all year. I thought defensively he played really well, and just kind of the added dimensions that he can give of being a little bit more. I don't want to say athletic, but I think he's a little quicker with his feet than Krivas is. When we've seen Krivas in the game, they pretty much run a drop coverage on ball screens.
Hmm.
Like a lot of people point to the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA for doing it with Brook Lopez. He's not super quick with his feet, so they don't want to put him in switches with on ball screens. So they'll have him sag ready for the roll. And that's kind of what U of A's done with Krivas this year. He sagged, so it's given the on-ball guard in pick and rolls a lot more ability to be able to get a shot from the screen defender coming in late, or a quick 2-on-1 if the defender goes over the screen. And so Vesar adds a new dimension to where he's up in the ball screen, hedging very heavily and making the on ball guard carry out his dribble a few steps further instead of going downhill into the paint with a head of steam. And they did it really well. I thought it took away and it made UCLA kind of move into different actions. And that was a thing I love to see that we haven't really seen so far this year. And especially going into Big 12 play, like there's a lot of teams that do that. Baylor does that really well. I remember when they matched up against Arkansas earlier in the year, Arkansas could not stop their on ball screens. And they did that the entire second half and beat them by, I think, double figures in that game. So that's a big thing that I think we're going to see a lot of in the Big 12. So I was very impressed to see how Vesar was able to defend in the pick and roll situation.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I kind of so yeah, off the top you did state Krivas. It is a shame he
Mm-hmm.
obviously had some injury concerns coming into the year, and now the re-aggravated his injury, and now he's going to be out for we don't really know at this point. But yeah, like you said about Vesar, it's kind of a weird game for me because the first half I thought he played well, and then when he got into the second half, some of his decision making is just is really questionable because to me he had two of the biggest errors for this team down the stretch. I believe we're just about 3 minutes or under. Arizona was up by 2 points. I don't know if you remember this, but they had like a fast break. Visar got the ball on the
Took a
corner
three.
or
Yep.
on the arc, and he shot a three when they're up by 2 points. It's just it's really just an inexcusable mistake. You can't do that, especially if you're not a reliable shooter. He was 0 for 4 from three, 3 for 8 from the field. His finishing ability is just not up to par for a guy that's playing 25 plus minutes at this point in his career. It's that simple. And besides that, he also had another foul, his fourth foul, I believe, about
Mm-hmm.
30 seconds after he missed that three. So it's just the guy, although he did finish with 9 points and 7 rebounds, to me, the thing that sticks out the most for him in this game are the 4 turnovers, the 4 fouls, and the 4 missed 3 pointers. He really didn't do Arizona any favors in those clutch later moments. So it's really concerning. And it just seems like, for whatever reason, I'm not going to blame coaching, because I always say a coach can be so good, but at a certain point, the players need to listen to the coaching and need to just be aware of
Perform.
their surroundings and
Yeah.
perform. And it's all about the player's IQ level. Not every player can make the best decisions in the right moments. So I think that's a degree to this. Also, just Arizona, the biggest glaring thing that stood out to me, Arizona 22 turnovers in this game. A lot. We always talk about rebounding. They actually out rebounded UCLA 34-24. They did well in that area, but they had 22 turnovers. They shot 2 for 16 from deep. You're not going to win basketball games like that. We talk about it all the time, and when you put that side to side with your most well-known player and the guy that's supposed to be a star, Caleb Love, scoring 7 points once again, just cannot be consistent. It's just not a recipe for success for this Arizona team.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think one thing that I look at with Vesar specifically, and I spent that entire time talking about is defense, because I think that is where this Arizona team has really not been able to be like strong in any way, sense, or form of it. They can't defend inside the paint. They can't defend the 3 point line. They can't defend the transition. So I think bringing him up in that aspect, I think that's a thing that they need to get back to. And in the last 3 years, a lot of Tommy Lloyd's era has been defense. These his teams have been defensive juggernauts and able to get turnovers and to get in transition. And that's how then they've been able to get into the rhythms and to get guys good shots, good open shots. And there's not one single, like, I think outside of this game, Jaden Bradley probably played the best complementary basketball. He had, I think it was almost over over 5 steals in the game, got into double figures. That's great. But nobody else really can play complementary basketball on both sides of the court. Like, Caleb Love doesn't really add anything defensively. He hasn't really added anything offensively this year. Kobe Bryant's kind of just an athlete on the court. Haven't really seen a great game from him yet. Trey Townsend still has not had a great offensive game. Defensively, he's not big enough to really match up against forwards. And so I think this team still is in a place where they need to figure out who they are and what they're doing offensively and defensively. And I think with his teams, like, it just goes back, his teams start on the defensive end, being aggressive, getting steals and getting in transition. And so I think that's just a big thing. I think that should lead to Vesar getting more minutes, is a little bit more dependability on the defensive side. And I agree with you. That was a terrible shot. But also, if it's Caleb Love, we're probably like, that's not a great shot, but that's Caleb Love. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it
I
was
agree,
super
but
uncharacteristic of him. But go
yeah,
ahead.
I agree. No, I agree with that 100%. And Caleb Love, I've always said it. He takes you to the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. And it's like, if Caleb's having a good game and he wants to take that shot up 2 points, which he has done in the past, and it's worked
Yep.
out and it hasn't, but he has earned that right to do that. Also, you mentioned the defensive side of the ball. I think they've been horrible. I mean, they've been horrible on defense. Sky Clark had double figures before I could even blink my eyes in the first 8 to 10 minutes of this game. I mean,
Yep.
he is a really good veteran guard, but he hasn't scored the ball like that all season long. And Tyler Bilodeau, I mean, that guy was just shredding this Arizona interior defense. Whenever he wanted, he got what he wanted whenever he wanted. And those were the two guys that really were the killers for this Arizona defense. And yeah, getting
Definitely.
back to kind of what I said, it's this team just isn't disciplined. And I'm starting to think, obviously, they're still 9 games in. They're not even 10 games in yet. They will be on Wednesday when they have their next game. But maybe this team, Jordan, we have to start to ask ourselves, maybe this team isn't talented enough. Maybe this team isn't a tournament team. What do you think about that?
I think this team definitely is looking in the mirror and telling themselves that. From the outside, this is a top 25 team that they had a double digit lead over. And in football, they talk about the middle eight a lot. The 4 minutes right before halftime and the 4 minutes right after
Yep.
halftime. Arizona dominated the middle eight in this game. That's when they jumped out to a lead. They were at a lead at halftime, and they built up their 13-point lead in that second half within the first part of the half. And that's a big thing that I saw in this game that I have not seen from this team. I've seen a lot of stagnant of pretty low lows, but not very high highs. In this game, I saw some high highs. The way that they were able to get the ball defensively and to get in transition, starting with Bradley and Vesar. And I just saw they put UCLA in the blender sometimes where UCLA couldn't get shots off. They had a few shot clock violations, and I saw some very high highs from them in this game that I have not seen from them in any other game. And so from that perspective, it's hard for me. But then again, like you look at the lows of this game, I don't did they even have like a non-free throw bucket in the last 5 minutes?
No,
I don't think
yeah,
they
I
did.
don't think so.
So those are some pretty low lows, especially for what we know of Tommy Lloyd teams. Scoring under 70, that's pretty weird for his teams. Scoring under 60, that's crazy. That's
Yeah,
absurd.
no, I 100% agree. And especially you mentioned, yes, they were good in the middle of that game, the end of the first half, the beginning of the second
Yep.
half. But the most important thing in all
Yep.
sports is how you finish. You
Finish.
need to finish games strongly. And when you have this team who just continues, they've been in a couple close games now down the stretch. They've had
Yep.
leads here and there, and they can't finish because, like I said, they don't have a finisher on this team, and it's really just I really just don't get it. I've said it in the first couple games. I thought it about like just thinking in the back of my head. I haven't seen a player go from what Caleb Love was his first 3 years in college plus to what he is now. I really just don't remember a guy who was literally good for 15 to 18 points a night every single night, proved it on two different schools, even with his ups and downs, he still was capable on offense. And then now he really just is he's almost a liability on offense. He's almost a
Yep.
liability on the court because you mentioned he doesn't really add anything on defense, and if he's not hitting shots, what's he really out there to do?
He's running out there at that point. And you bring up Caleb Love. We have the reigning Horizon League Offensive Player of the Year as well. Trey Townsend is not adding anything to this team either. He's barely averaging double figures. And as a guy that was a league player last year, we got two league players on our team that played college basketball last year and that made the NCAA tournament, made it past the first round of the NCAA tournament, leading their teams. And they're barely able to get double figures in games.
Yeah, I think this year, I'm just going to flat out say it. I think this is going to prove how Tommy Lloyd does in the last half of the part of the season here and through the rest of the season. This is going to prove to me how good of a coach he is. Because if he can salvage this, they're 4-5 right now. They've lost, they're 2-5 in their last 7 games since they started the year 2-5. If he can salvage this and get them kind of moving in the right direction, moving forward when they enter conference play. Because conference play is only about a little under 2 weeks away at right now. At the end of the month, it's starting up before
Yep.
the new year. So
Yep.
and we know how hard conference play is. If you think UCLA is good, what about Houston? What about Baylor? These teams are loaded. Kansas, these teams are just I mean, they're
Iowa
killers.
State.
Every single
Yep.
Iowa State is unbelievable. They're so well coached, all of them too. It really seems like this team could be headed maybe how Arizona football went, where last year they had all the regular season success, had a great year, and then this year they really just turn the clocks back, and it seems like that could be the case right now. Do you think that this season can be salvaged still at this point?
I will say, I think Arizona football, that's a great comparison because turning the clocks back, that football team, that football program has seen some very low lows. Their Fish's first year, they won one game. We have not seen the Arizona basketball program in a place like this since Sean Miller's first year, even going back before Sean Miller. This is very unprecedented territory for many Arizona fans.
Yeah, it is. It really is, and you expect the Arizona football program. They do have a good year every about 5, 10 years, and then
10 years, yeah.
they kind of regress. But the basketball program, as you just mentioned, they're not used to this. They're not used to they don't miss the tournament that much, in fact. And I know
Yep.
that's still early, and Arizona still has the games on their schedule to get back into the tournament,
Yep.
or not back into the tournament, but they even have the games on their schedule where they could be ranked again at some point if
Yep.
they can get
You
this
completely
back
agree.
to if they can get this back on track. But what I've just been saying and continued to state is that it's concerning that UCLA is a good team, but you're basically playing them on your home turf. Well,
Mm,
you're
yeah.
playing them in front of your home fans pretty much, and they just constantly their players just come up short. They just do, and these guys are guys that have experience. And this was my concern. If you remember back in our first episode when we started this season, at the beginning of the season, my concern was they have a lot of players that are stepping up into bigger roles that they have never experienced before in their life. Toby Awaka, he played limited minutes last year. He only played 12 minutes against UCLA, but he's played over 20 multiple games this
Yep.
season. Trey Townsend has played at a smaller school, even though he played in a big role. Carter Bryant's a freshman. You could run down the whole thing. Besides Caleb Love, all the other guys, Jaden Bradley was the backup. KJ Lewis, even though he's still coming off the bench, he's playing 25, 30 minutes every single night. And so it just seems like the spotlight seems like and the opportunities maybe are just a little too much for some of these guys right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. And that's every single player on this roster. Like you said, even KJ Lewis, he's stepping into a bigger role. He's expected to do more offensively. He's getting more minutes. Anthony Del Orso, he's stepping up into a completely new kind of competitive league. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think just to piggyback, like this league is going to be so good to where if a miracle is going to happen, there's still a possibility, but there's also a very big possibility of the complete opposite happening and this team finishing very well below 500 in this league. That is how good this league is, and that is how many great coaches are in this league. Like you mentioned a few, like there's a lot of room for this team to lose a lot of games very quickly in this league.
100%. And Mick Cronin is a great coach and one of the best
Yep.
coaches to me in the country at bringing his teams and pushing them the furthest that he can and getting the most out
Hmm.
of his roster. I feel like that's what he does the best because this UCLA team isn't one of the most talented teams in the country, but what
Hmm.
they do is they hustle and more than maybe any team in the country, and they all just find little ways to impact the game. So yeah, overall, I obviously we both predicted Arizona to win this one, and it seems like it's kind of just false hope at this point. And I mean, flat out, we could say this, but they've played all their big games, non-conference games before conference play starts. I don't think this could have gone any worse. They've lost to Wisconsin, they lost to Duke, they lost in the battle for Atlantis against Power Five teams. They lost to UCLA. It really just seems like before the season, because right now you can play, you can go counter and say, oh, I could have saw this happening, but in reality, we could have never saw this happening,
Nope.
and nobody could before the season.
Yeah, being I think they're 10th, 11th ranked going into the year, but
11th,
there
yep.
was and there was two or three Big 12 teams ahead. It was like, oh, we're gonna be fighting with the dogs in this league our first year. Now it looks
Yeah.
like ASU is better than this Arizona program right now.
Yeah. And it seems like also Arizona, they're not like even the guys that have came back, and because a lot of these guys were at Arizona last year or before, but
Yep.
they're not used to they're used to easing in the conference play and having a couple easy home games and here and
Hmm.
there. It's like every team is feisty and competitive in the Big 12. There's not gonna be games off like that. They're gonna be
Yep.
in environments that they've never been in before on a weekly, nightly basis. So yeah, this Tommy Lloyd and then this coaching staff has to get this team ready because they just don't look ready, and they looked underprepared in all these games that I've seen recently, and they continue to shoot themselves in the foot. As I mentioned, they blew a 13-point lead. Do you have any more thoughts on this game versus UCLA before we move on and talk about the week ahead?
I would say I would say the players are going to be the reason this season gets turned around. As much as we say Tommy Lloyd does have his workout cut out for him, he's not the one on the court that's playing possession in, possession out.
100%.
So Sean Miller's a player's program kind of motto that he always had. Right now, we got to see it. That's got to be brought back at this point because as much as Tommy every week in and week out says Caleb Love is the leader on our team, he's the face of my program. 13.3 points a game and not adding anything defensively, shooting below all of your major averages is if that's the face of your program, it's not looking good. It's a bottom tier. It's a very easily bottom tier Big 12 team if we're gonna get this version of Caleb Love night in and night out.
100%. There were a lot of Arizona fans, as I mentioned, in Phoenix at the home of the Phoenix Suns. But if anything could help Arizona to get back on track, it's the Arizona crowd, their fan base, and it's the McCall Center,
Yep.
still one of the greatest college courts and arenas in the sport, period. And this week they have two home games at McCall Center, so hopefully they can get back on track. They have two non-conference games. Their two last non-conference games before they play TCU on December 30th at home to open up conference play. They play Samford Wednesday night. It's happening 9 p.m. on the East Coast, 7 p.m. local time. It's going to be on ESPN Plus. Then they play Central Michigan, who has been pretty rough this year, 4-5, December 21st on Saturday at 2 p.m. local time, also on ESPN Plus. The Plus is the home of the Wildcats lately. But yeah, what do you opening up? What do you think about this game versus Samford? Samford has been pretty good this year, 92. They've played a couple. They've lost to a couple big teams, but they haven't really beat anyone of note lately. But they do have some veterans on the squad.
Yeah, their two losses, three possession game against Michigan State. I believe that was at in East Lansing as well. It wasn't in a kind of tournament, so that's a pretty hard environment to go in and to be within three possessions. And then Cornell was their only other loss. They lost to them by 2 points. So a majority of the other mid majors they've been handling pretty well. This game could be pretty feisty, especially the increase in talent in especially Samford being in tough environments. I would like to see them give Arizona a little bit run for their money and make Arizona kind of dig in their claws a little bit and kind of work possession by
Yeah.
possession. Still a pretty big spread for this game, 18.5 for Arizona. I don't think they cover that,
I
to
don't
be
trust them to
honest.
I don't trust them to cover that against anybody.
Yeah. I don't trust them to cover that. I'd probably say they probably win. If they win this game, it'll probably be about the same, like probably 8.5 points
Yeah.
against Samford. That's probably what I expect
Yeah.
Wednesday night.
Yeah, Samford, they have four guys in scoring double figures. They actually score a little over 90 points per game, more than Arizona. So
Yep.
they do score the ball very well. Obviously, they haven't been played in an environment of Arizona as good as Arizona's this year, even though they played Michigan State. As I just said, I think 18 and a half is way too many points, but if Arizona can't beat Samford, no disrespect to Samford, then this program is in more trouble than I even envisioned before earlier today. So I think Arizona. I think they'll win this game by 10 points. I'm saying that. I'm praying that they can to get a nice victory heading into conference play. But to round out the weekend on Saturday, it's their first two game week in a couple weeks. They've, as I've kind of stated, they've had a
Yep.
little bit of a football schedule, one game a week recently after the battle for Atlantis. But two games this week, I think this is going to be good for them to get back in the flow of things. Because I think sometimes when you only play once a week, if you do like what you do wrong, you don't have you have so much time in between to fix it. So I think this will be good if they have some things to fix for Saturday's game. I think that'll be good. Central Michigan, like I said, they play at 2 in the afternoon on Saturday at home once again. Like I said, Central Michigan 4-5 on the season. there's not I didn't see a line out for this one yet, but I think Arizona wins this game by more. I think they win by at least 15 points or more. Um, and yeah, I think that this should be a good little 2 game stretch for them before conference play. If hopefully everything goes right. What do you think about game versus Central Michigan?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they'll win pretty handedly. They've been struggling quite a bit this year. Um, but yeah, I think they'll get a win.
Yeah, so we both agree on that. Hopefully, we're not wrong again for it seems like every game I keep saying Arizona's going to win and they just can't get the job done. It's just a shame. But yeah, do you have any other final thoughts about just where the program's at right now? Because they're in, like we said, they're in a really weird position right now.
Yeah, I think it's challenging. I think as just in this era, I think you want to say, well, now see, this is what's happening. Now Tommy Lloyd's got like his players and then there's Sean Miller's players, but that very much isn't the case because the last few years have been the rosters have been completely flipped in and out pretty much every other year. And so Tommy's always kind of had his guys. And so this is just kind of uncharted territory in general. Because he does have all of these guys that he's the one that's handpicked and recruited and gotten on campus. Um, but it'll just be interesting. I think the game against UCLA and Krivas being injured, I think definitely forced them to tweak with different lineups. And like I said, I definitely saw some really big positive things I saw from some of those lineups. So I'll be curious to see if they continue to experiment or if they try to carve out some very specific roles and some very specific minutes barriers for guys.
Yeah, personally, until they prove me otherwise, my expectations for this season and for the season to be considered a success have totally changed for me.
Mm,
I think if they can make this tournament and I think if they can win 1 game, this would be like a crazy year that they've salvaged. But then again, it's so hard today in college basketball because we saw UConn lose a couple games and then they have a great 2 week
yep.
stretch and now they're back in the top 12 in college basketball. And that's why we love this sport so much because when you do play in such a tough conference like the Big 12, anything can change like that. So I really think that as much as I say that this season is still I think we're gonna know even more when they start in their first week or two in conference play where this team can be at this season. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in to today's episode of Bear Down Ballers here on the Field of 68. Follow us on X at Bear Down AZ Pod. Follow the Field of 68. Thank you for tuning in. He's Jordan Pollock. I'm Ryan.